Poverty stinks.
I see signs of poverty in my town, and I'm told it's getting worse.
Poverty levels have gone up in 38 states.
Poverty and inequality rising.
Poverty in America is, in fact, a death sentence.
But is it really?
Do you have television?
Absolutely.
How many channels?
101.
Liberal politicians say government must help the poor.
I am my brother's keeper, that I am my sister's keeper.
They're upset that some Americans are so much richer than others.
My mother and father dreamed as much as any rich guy dreams.
Some rich guys build huge homes. This one's 20,000 feet. Who needs that?
You have this excessive home when some people are poor.
In America, we tend not to use the word need about what other people are allowed to do with their money.
Rich man, poor man. That's our show tonight.
And now, John Stossel.
America is a rich country, and yet amidst such wealth, there is poverty. The media keep telling me there's terrible poverty.
More than 46 million people lived in poverty last year.
That does sound terrible, but what does poverty mean in America today?
Poverty stinks.
I recently stopped by this food kitchen in Harlem. People line up for free food. Most want government to do more for them.
Give us more jobs and more opportunities for those less fortunate.
Government should just create jobs.
Create jobs, yeah, create more jobs.
More food stamps?
More food stamps.
More welfare?
More welfare.
These people say they're poor, but in America these days, poverty is not what you may think it is.
I'm not exactly poor, but I'm not exactly rich either.
In today's America, most poor people have cars, air conditioning, cell phones, and televisions.
Yes, I have a TV.
Yeah, I have a television.
You have air conditioning?
Yes.
Cable TV?
Yeah.
How many channels?
101.
How many?
101. Play games on it mostly.
Game player, video player?
Yeah, I play video games.
You have a cell phone?
Yeah, of course I do. Got to keep in touch with the family.
A report by the Heritage Foundation found today 99.6% of poor people have a refrigerator. 97% have a TV. 65% more than one. Most have cable. Most have cell phones and air conditioning. Now, I don't claim that TVs and air conditioning are all that people need, and many poor people have a hard life. Some of the people I interviewed outside that soup kitchen said they were homeless. My point is that the propaganda about American poverty has led to a fat welfare state that hurts everyone, encourages dependency. Some say we've created a nation of moochers, people addicted to getting something for nothing. In fact, that's the title of a new book by radio host Charles Sykes. So, moochers?
Well, I think it's time to get rid of the euphemisms. It's not about fairness. It's not about sharing the wealth. I mean, the reality is that's an old-fashioned word that says that some people just simply have their hand out and they want something for nothing. And one of the things that I think we need to do is start calling things by their real name.
So let's talk about the real numbers. The poverty line at the moment is $22,000 for a family of four.
Right.
Sounds quite low, hard to live that way.
Right. But the part of the problem, though, is that we don't count all the money they get from the government. We don't
free stuff.
Right. We don't count
housing,
all of the exactly.
Medical care, food
right.
stamps doesn't count in that.
Right. So in fact, what you've done is you've taken out of the consideration most of the money that a lot of these individuals are getting from the rest of us. And so yes, it looks scary, it looks bad, but the reality is that we have become a very generous society, perhaps, to a fault.
Thomas Sowell says it was more accurate to refer to the haves and the have-lots.
Well, one of the problems of poverty, as you just illustrated, is that the poor people have a lot of stuff. Now, I'm not saying there aren't people with real need, but one of the really scary numbers is that it used to be, like in 1979, that more than half of the transfer payments in this country went to the very poorest people. Now, it's about 36%, which means that the safety net has become this rather large, squishy mattress.
Still, it's the rich who get the most in dollars, I assume, all the corporate welfare, right. The handouts the cotton farmers get, right. The subsidized green entrepreneurs like Solyndra, and Mike Huckabee and I got free golf carts, $6,000 golf cart, because there's a tricky tax credit. It's expired now. Mm-hmm.
But this was all to encourage people to use electric vehicles. I got flood insurance on my beach house, which I shouldn't have gotten. Isn't most of the money going to us more wealthy people?
Well, see, that's part of the problem, is we have created this mooching culture across lines of class. And this is how you create a culture of mooching. When everyone looks around and says, you know what? Everyone is getting a bailout. Everybody is getting a handout. It becomes very, very difficult to say no to the next person that comes up and says, well, okay, so John Stossel is getting some goodies. What about me? You know, we bailed out the folks on Wall Street. We bailed out General Motors. What about my Main Street business? And what we've seen over the last couple of years is the inability to say no. And
I didn't say no to flood insurance.
Well, that's right.
I felt like a sucker. Everybody's getting it. I'm turning the money down.
Well, that's the key, I think, is that sucker principle. At what point do the people who play by the rules, the people who save, who work hard, who don't dip into the public trough, at what point do they look around and see everybody else getting the transfers, the benefits, and say, if I don't get in line, I'm a sucker? And that's where I think we have the tipping point, when the makers in society begin to think that they are the suckers because there are so many takers, and we've encouraged it across the board.
Though I'm encouraged that at least the talk has changed. I mean, one thing that's new in America is that more recipients of corporate welfare are at least now embarrassed. They know that some people consider them to be pigs, and today, most corporate welfare queens will not agree to be interviewed by me about this. But years ago, America's biggest recipient of corporate welfare flew me out to his headquarters so he could arrogantly dismiss me. Here's a look at Dwayne Andreas of Archer Daniels Midland. You're a pig feeding at the welfare trough.
Why should I care?
Doesn't bother you?
Not a bit.
It was just, okay, that's the deal. We get the money. I don't think a CEO would do that today.
No, but in fact, we have a lot of business executives who go to Washington and frankly have decided maybe that it's more important to grease the right palms or to get the right subsidy, either the bailout or the tax break. That is more important than creating a quality product. And what you saw there is that mentality. And as long as
it's hard to work to create a better product.
It is.
But to spend $5 million to get $1 billion from government.
Absolutely. The return on investment of getting on an airplane and going in and sucking up to some United States senators is fantastic if you can get billions of dollars. And unfortunately, I think in this bailout period that we've been in, we've seen companies be more successful by going and currying favor and getting money from the rest of us than companies that have just, frankly, done it the old-fashioned way.
In your book, you write a riff called I Piggy Bank.
Yes. I pay for the bridge to nowhere. I pay for studies on Chinese prostitutes. I pay for other people's orthodontia. I pay for all of these things that you realize that
to bail out AIG.
Exactly. I pay for AIG. I pay public employees for their exorbitant salaries. And this is that tipping point of being the sucker.
Bank.
I am the
Thank
piggy.
you.
That is my role.
Pay for my flood insurance.
I pay all of these taxes. So my only function here, you're not celebrating my success. You're not celebrating my entrepreneurial zeal, my risk-taking. What you're looking at me is like, hey, can I turn you into a piggy bank? How can I get more money from you?
Last point. You say America shouldn't infantilize its citizens.
Right.
What do you mean?
This assumption that we can't handle it, that we all need to be moochers. That basically says, you know what? We are going to create this social welfare state that treats us as dependents, treats us as we're permanent children.
That's too bad, but thank you, Charles Sykes, author of A Nation of Moochers. And now that we've talked about the poor, I'm going to confront a rich guy. He's building a house this big. Is that fair?
Corporations that act like fake monarchs. They give you minimum wage, no pension, no retirement, no vacation, no sick pay. We can't afford rent no more.
The anti-capitalist protesters are furious that some of you have much more money than others. But it's not just the silly protesters. A poll found 6 in 10 Americans say government should reduce the gap between the wealthy and the less well-off. Well, Cliff Asness is one of those wealthy people. He's gotten absurdly rich growing an investment firm, and he says that's okay. Why is it okay? You're just moving money around and you're feeding off the public.
Well, you have a lot of issues there. Is it okay to make a lot of money, and is it okay to make a lot of money through an investment firm? Investment firms, we discover very rapidly when people doing investing do their jobs poorly. Prices
All right, but
get
explain
crazy.
that, because people get that Stephen Jobs created jobs and products, but you just shuffle money around.
Investment firms, banking, speculators, everyone like this gets accused of shuffling money around. Yet we've been around since the Roman Empire, and apparently there's an economic reason for this. A lot of a modern economy depends on prices being right. We've seen what happens when prices are wrong. We've seen the tech bubble. We've seen the real estate bubble. But free economies with people spending their own money and betting their own money on things get prices far more accurate than if the government is sitting there and telling you what prices should be, or if nobody's doing it. So in banking, investment management, any of these things serve a vital function. They get money to the right parts of the economy at the right price.
If the investor bets right, those companies grow. If he bets wrong, he loses his own money.
That's the whole idea. And the flip side, not sending money after bad ideas is just as important. One thing we've got to remember about capitalism, it sounds ugly, but failure is every bit as important as success.
All right, but a result of that the protesters complain about is this income disparity. And it is big in America and growing bigger. I would say it's a byproduct of freedom. When you're free, some people will do much better than others. But as the stock market goes up, your class got filthy rich. It's wrong. It's immoral.
First of all, some of these numbers are disputed. There are a lot of new studies out this. Economist named Tyler Cowen, who I'm a big fan of, talks about something called consumption equality, the stuff we actually buy with our money. That's a lot more equal than it was 50 years ago. If you go back 50 years, the difference between a middle-class person and the richest person in the country and the stuff they bought with their money was probably a lot different than the difference between a middle-class person and even Bill Gates right now.
Even poor people in America have access to cars, air conditioning, flush toilets, things that kings didn't have about a century.
You would rather be a poor person in America than a king in the 1600s, in the 1800s even.
Right.
That's
But given that, there's still this disparity that feels unfair.
Americans have always been, and I think this is a very good deal, been willing to accept even large amounts of inequality as long as there were three things present. Very quickly. One, that those at the top didn't cheat. I think you're a crazy person if you think the vast majority of the well-off in this country have cheated to get their money. I think it's the exception, not the rule. When it happens, we should go after it with all guns blazing. Number two is growth. Does inequality in a system where there are outsized rewards lead to more prosperity? I think even over the so-called last 30 years, there's new evidence that says, yes, it's led to more prosperity for everyone. But over our history, the evidence, the book is closed on this. It does lead to more prosperity. The last one is the dodgiest one, mobility. Can someone, do we have landed aristocracy in this country, or can everyone have a shot at being that person who's well off? Mobility has gone down. Most statistics show it has gone down to where it's harder to move out of the bracket your parents were in.
But it hasn't gone down that much. A Pew study looked at families followed up for 30 years. 68% of the kids born to the poorest fifth had risen to a higher income group. 6% went from the bottom to the top. And of the kids born to the richest families, 61% fell out of the group and 9% went all the way to the bottom.
Well, I must tell you, it's rude when you come here with more facts than you guess. To be frank, most rich guys and women I know didn't start out there. A lot of them are middle class. A lot of them are lower middle class. I'm sorry to break this to my dad, but I'm not the son of a rich father. His secret is out. But if you're very poor in this country, you can get trapped into a cycle of poverty. I know you've discussed it before, but the marginal tax rate on work when you're on government assistance is very high, meaning to give up government benefits and go try to get a job is not always a very good deal in the system we've set up. But
we've
worse,
taught dependence.
We've taught dependence, and we've not rewarded the attempt to get off dependence.
All right, last question on just the morality of the income disparity. I'm reading the Wall Street Journal, and there's an article about your new home you're building. More than 20,000 square feet. That's gross. You have this excessive home when some people are poor.
Did the article mention I had 4 kids born within a year and a half? I'm kidding.
You
still
need
don't
40
need,
kids.
You still don't need. In America, we tend not to use the word need about what other people are allowed to do with their money. Now, let me talk about my tax rate. My marginal tax rate depends how many of the taxes you count, but it's somewhere north of 50. What I do with what's left, it's really my business, I got to tell America. I actually have a counter proposal for Warren Buffett. Let's assume if you've made some money in your life, you're working for your kids, and add up, if you make $10, how does it get to your kids, and take all the different income taxes you pay, the Social Security tax, the Medicare tax, the tax on investment income as it waits to get to your kid, and eventually the inheritance tax. I will sign on for the Buffett rule. Again, it won't cost me a nickel because I'm into the 50s, but I will sign on to the Buffett rule for all, we all hang out together, for all my friends. If he will sign on for the government doesn't get more than 70% of what you make when you add it all up. I think more than 70%, taxes are necessary. We need taxes to run the country. Saying taxes are theft, as some on our side do, is too extreme. Some are, but taxes of more than 70% are approaching theft. So when someone's paying more than 50 and want to spend their money on what they want, people should stay out of it. And when some people are paying more than 70 on the money they can give their kids, that's where the immorality is coming from.
One point I want to quibble with, we don't need taxes to run the country. We need taxes to run the government. We run the country. Free people run most of the country.
Well, you're correcting me, not quibbling, because I agree with you.
Okay. Thank you, Cliff Asness. More on that evil wealth disparity when we return. My new book is about how intuition leads us astray. And my favorite example in the book is public schools, or government-run schools, as I like to call them. People say America's public schools are one of the best parts of America. And we're imprinted to believe that. But what I've learned is that the opposite is true. Government schools are one of the worst parts of America. Not just because the government monopoly wastes money and doesn't educate well, but because the schools aren't even the melting pot that people think they are. Today's government schools are more racially segregated than private schools, but people don't know that. One man who does know and also fights for education choice is Patrick Byrne, the CEO of Overstock.com, which sells cheap stuff via the internet. So, Patrick, you call the school choice movement the civil rights issue of the 21st century.
That's right. I do.
Because
if people are worried about income inequality and racial inequality and all this inequality, they should really understand a lot of that gets driven by educational inequality. And if you've got some folks graduating from high school with a bucket full of human capital and some folks graduating with a thimble, the way to address it is to address the inequality in the school system.
And we get more social stratification under the government monopoly system because you're assigned by your zip code. You don't have a choice. So if you live in a rich neighborhood, odds are you're going to school with other affluent kids. Odds are it's a better school.
Exactly. Not only do voucher programs break that down in getting kids into more integrated schools, but there's academic evidence, papers have been published showing that the civic virtues of the children who then take advantage of those is higher than average.
Civic virtues meaning?
More tolerant, less racist. They measure it by looking at how kids eat together in cafeterias. And they're more likely in private schools, even adjusting for composition, they're more likely to eat lunch with each other across races than they are in public school.
You're now chairman of the Friedman Foundation for Education Choice, which it was Milton Friedman who first introduced the idea of vouchers.
Right. It's broken loose in the last year or two, I would say. There have been 13 states passing 25 different voucher programs in the last 2 years. Just some more happened today in Arizona. And a couple weeks ago in Louisiana and in Indiana, there's now 1 million kids eligible.
Louisiana now allows students statewide to get a voucher if they're enrolled in public schools graded C, D, or F by their accountability system. So they're not vouchers for everybody. In Indiana, you get a voucher worth $4,500, which is a fraction of what the government schools are really spending. But you can't be rich. But it's better than we've seen before.
Right. It covers the bottom 55% of kids. From the income cap is
$61,000 for a family of 4.
So that covers about 55% of the families. So it's a start. At the end of the day, Milton used to say a voucher program for the poor will be a poor voucher program. But it
should be for everybody.
It should be for everybody. Everybody should have this choice. But we'll certainly take it as a start, and we think that within a few years there'll be enough data that there'll be a great demonstration effect, and we'll just see it spread.
So let's say we all get vouchers, we start picking the schools compete, they all get better. But there's some real rich schools where rich people go and add their voucher to the already extra tuition. There'll be some inequity. And I look at Chile, which has better schools because of vouchers, and yet people there rioted because it was inequality, a separation between rich people and poor people. And all these young people hate that.
Well, there are some irrational preferences in the world. I don't know how...
Well, we have to live with... I agree that they're irrational, but the population of the president in Chile was way up after they rescued the miners. Now it's down to 20% because of these stupid riots run by communists.
Well, Chile still has the best educational system in Latin America, I believe.
I think so. And they're protesting it, these idiots.
Well, they get confused. The people in Chile are rioting over some irrational set of beliefs. But at the end of the day, just remember they introduced school choice and they've developed the best educational system.
And they haven't gotten rid of it yet. That's true. Now, as CEO of Overstock, you're a rich guy, but you could argue you've helped the poor.
We've tried. We've probably saved people somewhere between $5 and $10 billion over the course of our history. And it's not curing cancer, but it's a nice step.
Thank you, Patrick Byrne. Coming up, the inequality that some people should be angry about. People like me steal from little kids. Excuse me, I have to take some of these. No, I'm the old person. I need this. No, I won't give it back. I need that. So I say the fact that there are rich and poor people in America shouldn't be a problem. We're a free society. Yes, the rich sometimes will get richer, but so do most of the poor, and that's good. But there is an injustice we should talk about. Every year, government takes billions from poor people and gives it to richer ones. I'm talking about America's biggest government programs, Social Security and Medicare. Now, I know that's a head spinner. People love those programs. Liberals, like Columbia University professor Mark Lamont Hill, say thank goodness for Social Security and Medicare. They allow the elderly poor a decent life. But the author of Red and Blue and Broke All Over, Charles Goyette, says liberals miss the big picture. What do you mean?
Picture's pretty big too, and it's getting bigger all the time, and it's the debt picture. You know, these young people are struggling now to find jobs, part-time jobs and so on, and yet they are paying for the Social Security and Medicare benefits of current retirees, and will be doing so for future
they're
retirees.
That's what the young people are supposed to do, support us future old geezers.
You have people paying today for the benefit of people who have had a better standard of living and are wealthier than they are. There's some generational inequity here, as you know.
And when you say they are wealthier, we have a graph. It shows that people 65 and older have a net worth of $170,000, 35 and under less than $4,000.
It's worse than that, because not only are the young people paying for the current and the future recipients of Social Security and Medicare, but in addition to that, they have been burdened with the hidden debt, the unfunded liabilities besides Social Security and Medicare.
Let Mark respond to the basic Medicare Social Security argument.
You make a really good argument for fixing Social Security and Medicare, Medicaid, all of that stuff. You get no disagreement from me in that regard. But there is a fundamental premise here that I still believe in, which is that the younger take care of the elderly. Of course, people who are 65 and older have greater net worth than people who are 35 and younger. They've been on the planet twice as long. They've paid off their homes. They accumulate.
Much of it is their home value.
It's their home value. That's almost all of it. They paid their mortgage. When you're 35, you haven't been able to pay off your mortgage yet. So that data is a bit misleading. The point here is that ultimately we're supposed to take care of the elderly, and I'm fine with that. I have absolutely no problem.
But the numbers don't work anymore.
Which is an argument for fixing it. It's not an argument for eliminating it.
How do you want to fix it?
Well, you know, my answer is
tax the rich?
Absolutely.
Tax the rich.
Yeah, but you can't tax them enough to cover the shortfall in these unfunded liabilities in Social Security.
Which is what taxation.
There's not enough money.
Which is what taxation isn't the only way to go. I think we have to tax, but you also have to think about.
Right, but we're in agreement. If you took all the rich people's money, it wouldn't be enough.
Right. Okay. And I wouldn't propose taking all the rich people's money. But I do think that if we raise the Social Security age.
But politicians who say, let's raise the retirement age, they get yelled at.
Well, it's not the most popular thing to do. But ultimately, we're at a crossroads right now. I think we agree that you can't just tax. You have to do something else.
All right. Raise the retirement age. Solves it?
It doesn't solve it. It prolongs the problem, kicks the can down the road. But, John, all of these things are a form of debt repudiation by the government. I think we need to face that squarely. It's the government saying, we made you a promise, or at least we treated it as a promise. You believed that it was a promise. It was not a promise. It was not good. It was not actuarially sound. It was a Ponzi scheme to begin with.
Well, I guess they might. It was previous politicians who did that.
Are you actually saying that Social Security as an idea is fundamentally wrong?
Sure.
Tell me why. I understand why you're saying it, in its execution you have a problem with it, but explain to me why it's wrong.
Well, in the words of Margaret Thatcher, the problem with socialism is pretty soon you run out of other people's money.
All right.
That's the answer.
Look at this graph, which shows how many workers there are per Social Security recipient. It made great sense in 1945 and even 1950 when there were 40 or 16 workers per retiree. But now it's gone down to 2.5.
Well, that shows exactly. Part of that shows where you two are in disagreement, because he's saying fundamentally as an idea it's flawed, whereas you're saying it's flawed in its execution based on the worker per recipient ratio. What I'm saying is
What's the difference?
You don't seem to have a problem with Social Security as an idea. You're simply saying we need to repair how it functions so that it can be functional.
How do you restore American prosperity? Do you keep prolonging these myths, these games? Do you destroy the economy and the culture by inflating your way out of a problem like Social Security? Or do you face them candidly and say, okay, we lied to you, the state lied to you, it was actuarially unsound, it was a Ponzi scheme, let's deal with this, let's let people opt out?
You say we shouldn't have these social programs because it changes people's attitudes about saving for themselves.
You know, I think that's the best point. This does change the fundamental character of the people, that somebody else will take care of their retirement benefits, their health care benefits, and so on and so forth. And so instead of being a nation of savers, creating pools of capital that make us all richer, we spend like crazy. And in the meantime, the Chinese are saving at a world-class, indoor world records of saving, and they are beginning to use this capital.
Because the Chinese, of all people, don't assume mama government will take care of them.
In fact, they know better. They know that they'll have to take care of themselves.
Most American people don't believe that they don't need to work hard or save, because at the end of their working age, the government will come in on a white horse and save them. You're making a huge leap to say that because Americans don't save enough, that they're not saving enough because they have the expectation Social Security will save them. That's a huge psychological interpretation you're making, that it's completely...
It doesn't matter why they're not saving.
It does matter why, because you're saying it does matter why, because you're saying that they're not doing it because they expect Social Security to save them.
But isn't that logical?
You have no evidence of that. No, it's not logical. They don't save because they don't have any...
If you're going to get Social Security, you're less scared.
John, they don't save because they don't have any money. I don't see Social Security as a government handout when people have invested their money for 65 years.
They haven't invested their money. Their money has been spent.
Contributed their money.
You gave your money to your no-good uncle, your no-good brother-in-law. He went out and spent it. And you come to me and you say, well, my retirement account says I have this, that, and the other, but the money has been spent.
So I'm clear.
It's long since gone.
So that I'm clear, you're comparing the United States to a no-good uncle.
Yes, actually, yeah. They've spent your money. You've contributed all your life, and it's not there.
They did rip us off. They said it was an insurance plan, and they spent it.
I think that's the wrong way to think about it. I think that what we've done is provide a safety net for the vulnerable, for the elderly, for the poor. I'm 33 years old. I'm the one paying this stuff.
Yeah, I'm ripping you off.
If anything, I should be the one ticked off. You guys, I should be the one ticked off, not you guys. And I'm totally fine paying in. I'm totally fine giving this money because I understand the value that it offers our society. And without that value, I mean, you can say, well, hypothetically, if people had, for the last 65 years, done something different, they'd have a different outcome. But the reality is right now we have people in their 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s who we have to support. And if we don't, something's going to happen to them. And ultimately, we pay now, we pay later.
You have 3.6 million people a year now entering the age of 65, the leading edge of the baby boomers. 3.6 million people a year becoming fully eligible for Medicare and Social Security benefits, and the money's not there.
I'm one of them. I'm a baby boomer. There are too many of us.
I think you'll be fine, sir.
I'll be fine.
In fact, you're the guy I want to tax.
So you should be mad at me. And here's how I picture the effects of Social Security and Medicare. Tell me why this is wrong. Excuse me. I have to take some of these. No, I'm the old person. I need this. No, I won't give it back. I need this. That's basically what we're doing, not just to you, but to the little...
Stealing from the young to give to the old.
Yeah.
I think again, this is like you think of this as like generational socialism or something, and I'm thinking about it as supporting people who need support. I think as a nation we have to do that.
Charles, it's cruel not to do this. You just want to dump the old people?
Yeah, if I had a wish machine, I'd wish us all back to American prosperity, but we've entered the new normal in which we're not as prosperous.
What about the people now who rely
we need
on
to
it?
confront the situation that we're in, and families are going to have to adjust. People are going to have to adjust. The Congress is going to have to adjust. And there are federal assets that can be sold to begin to make people whole. So,
wow. So sell federal assets and put my 85-year-old father back
in your home. Put him in your living room.
Oh, he's already in my living room. You want him back at Walmart or as a greeter. I'm saying it's simple.
On that note, thank you, Mark Lamont Hill, Charles Goyette. Coming up, poll numbers that surprise me. Apparently, Americans really are ready to make serious cuts in the budget. That's next.
Wealth envy.
Well, yeah, I think they are selling envy. Democrats think highlighting the gap between rich and poor and saying government must step in and stop the rich from getting away with stuff wins them votes. I think it probably does. People call it class warfare. But pollster Scott Rasmussen says I'm wrong, that class warfare doesn't really work.
Well, certainly if you say somebody else is getting away with something, people don't like that.
That works.
That works. And if you can convince people they're getting away with something, boy, that's really powerful. But the reason that calling for higher taxes on the wealthy works today is because most people think higher income people pay a smaller share of their income on taxes than anybody else. People don't want to soak the rich. They want to make sure that everybody pays the same share.
Most Americans believe that rich people who pay much more in taxes actually pay less.
That's a smaller share of their income.
I pay less than my assistant.
And part of it is skepticism about anything to do with government. Part of it is if you're rich enough, you can hire a good attorney or accountant to get you some special benefits. It's this suspicion.
And some of that's true, but in numbers, it's a lie, right?
But 2 out of 3 people believe the middle class pay a larger share of their income in taxes than anybody else. And by the way, not just when they look up on the income spectrum, a large number of people think those who make less than them aren't paying a fair share either.
And a fair share to most people in your polls is no more than?
Well, no more than 30% for anybody in America to pay to all governments, federal, state, and local.
I would love it if I paid 30%. I'm paying over 50% now.
That's right. People don't have a sense of how high taxes are, and they even underestimate how much they pay themselves in taxes.
Now, a Republican talking point is that 53% of Americans don't pay federal income taxes.
Yeah, this is class warfare of a different type, and it really doesn't make any more sense. They're paying sales taxes and state taxes and other taxes. And what's really interesting, they are more opposed to tax hikes than upper income Americans.
Really?
Yeah, then it makes sense because if you're at the lower end of the income spectrum, every dollar matters. So you can't afford to shell out that little bit of extra money. Those middle income and lower middle income Americans are the core of the anti-tax movement in America.
But Republicans, you say, are deceitful when they talk about income tax because payroll tax, all the other stuff.
Yeah, and by the way, it used to be income tax was the big part of it. Payroll taxes have been growing and are now a huge portion of everybody's life.
Another piece of poll data from you that surprised me, only 16% think that today's children will be better off than their parents. And that's a new low.
And it just continues to go down. We have reached a point where it used to be people were thinking, oh, there's a business cycle. We're going through a bad economic time. Now they're really concerned that something has fundamentally gone wrong, and they're not sure America can get out of the economic mess.
Another poll that surprised me, people think their own congressman is on the take, that he'll sell votes for cash?
Well, sure. This is what they think goes on. Most Americans believe the only reason business people give to politicians is because they're afraid the politician will hurt them if they don't. It's a legalized extortion racket. That's what people are seeing, and they think their own representative plays in that. And by the way, only 1 out of 4 people think their own representative in Congress is the best person for the job. It's just they end up voting for the lesser of 2 evils.
And he's probably not the best person for the job.
In most cases, probably true.
You say a proposal to combine means-tested programs into a single item and stop the growth would be popular. I can't believe that. Every time I talk about cuts, people scream at me. And when I've seen poll data on cutting
any Medicare, Social Security people.
Well, Social Security is not means tested. Medicare is not means tested. Medicaid is. 71% believe it's too easy to collect these welfare programs, and that what they'd like to do is trim a little bit of the eligibility standards so the people at the very top end aren't able to receive the benefits, but those who are lower down and who are struggling get their benefits. When you talk about other proposals like Social Security, people are open to ideas, but they're not open to cutting benefits for their grandparents. They want to make sure that today's kids have a decent deal.
Or that they have a decent deal.
That they have a decent deal.
But they won't, because there's no money to pay it all.
Well, here's what people are willing to do, though. If they can make the trade-off choices themselves, if you want to retire a little bit later and pay less in taxes now, you should have that right.
One piece of data that I thought was good news, you say most people think anyone who wants to work can work his way out of poverty.
That's right. I think it is very good news that people have that sense that working hard is the key to getting yourself into a better financial position.
You say the public is ahead of the politicians on this.
Absolutely. Look, the American people are ahead of the politicians on almost everything, and they have been through every major change in American life. When you start talking about the changes, if you begin talking about it, we have a budget crisis, we have to slash and burn and hurt people, you never get support like that. But if you can present a different picture of how Social Security will work, as I mentioned earlier, there's popular support for that.
The budget crisis has gotten to people. Spend less if it means...
Until we get our house in order. I mean,
people really want to spend less.
They want to spend less.
I so want that to be true. I hope it is.
It will come.
Scott Rasmussen. Up next, my take on rich versus poor. Those union protesters, they see the greedy side. They're upset that the rich get richer while the poor get poorer. Except that's not true. Well, the rich do get richer, especially when markets go up, that's true. But the poor got richer too. Not every year, but the poorest fifth of Americans are now 20% richer than they were when I was in college. And yes, that's adjusted for inflation. And it doesn't even include the improvements in life we talked about earlier. The fact that even poor people now have access to medicines, computers, phones, things even kings didn't used to have. In free societies, the rich get richer and the poor get richer too. But that won't convince the protesters, or even most Americans who, when polled, say they want government to reduce the wealth gap. That's why these women often wear Robin Hood caps. Government should take from the rich. I used to think that was key to helping poor people, but once I wised up and saw that economic freedom is crucial to both prosperity and the dignity of the individual, and I concluded that no, government can't, but individuals succeed, my life here in New York changed. I stopped winning Emmy Awards. My media colleagues didn't like me anymore. Someone even came up to me on the street here in New York and said, "Are you John Stossel?" "Yes." "I hope you die soon." So why is he so angry? At first, I thought it was because he considered me a conservative, and where I live, that's the worst thing you can be. It's like being a child molester. But I'm a lousy conservative. I'm a libertarian. I think homosexuality is just fine, that drugs and prostitution should be legal, that adults should be free to do anything that's peaceful. I'm a libertarian. I thought the liberals would like me because of that, but it's they who are most angry at me. Why? I've come to think it's because I'm a consumer reporter who now defends free markets, and they hate markets. They hate capitalism. They even hate the phrase laissez-faire, let it be free. They hate the vastly different results that freedom allows. I kind of understand their anger. That some Americans are so rich while others struggle intuitively feels wrong, unfair. But when government tries to fix that, what does it do? President Obama talks about making millionaires and billionaires pay their fair share. But once you include all the taxes rich people pay, government already takes more than half of rich people's money. Even if Obama took 100% of the money, that would be less than a fifth of what he wants to spend. Wouldn't even cover half of our deficit, our debt,
would still go up. And of course, if you tax rich people at 100%, you wouldn't get the money because most would stop working. Government would have killed the geese that lay the golden eggs. It's already doing that now. Now, some countries have reduced income inequality. Cuba, North Korea, for example. They reduced the gap by making everyone poor. No, even that's not true. The political elites in those countries have much more than the average person. So how about Europe? They've limited the wealth gap with social democracy. Sounds so nice. But it means lots of rules and higher taxes. Pretty much what we're doing now, here. It did limit Europe's wealth gap. But again, it did it by keeping everyone a little bit poorer. Facebook, for example, was not invented in Europe for a reason. It happened here for the same reason Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Home Depot, and Walmart happened here, because we still have some economic freedom. And that's good, because if we're somewhat free, if Washington's bureaucrats don't totally strangle us, Americans will invent things. As a result, some people will be much richer than others. And to that I say, so what? The world will be richer, and most everyone will be better off. That's our show. We'll have another new Stossel show next Thursday night at 9 p.m. on the Fox Business Network. Thanks for watching.